Namaste, Sashi Akal, and welcome to Dharma Explorers. Dharma Explorers is a series of conversations with eminent personalities who are strong supporters of Hindu Dharma but were not born in Hindu household. My name is Jay Bansal. I'm your host today. I'm affiliated with the Vishwa Hindu Parishad of America, where I serve as the Vice President of Education. Today, it is my honor to welcome Dr. Nathan Katz, Professor Emeritus at Florida International University, as our guest and speaker for the day. So a very warm welcome to you, Nathan Ji.
Thank you, and to you.
Pleasure to have you as always. And before we begin the conversation, Nathan, let me just give a brief introduction of yours to our viewers. So Nathan Katz is a distinguished professor emeritus at Florida International University. He also served as the Bhagwan Mahavir Professor of Jain Studies, Director of Jewish Studies, and founding chair of the Department of Religious Studies. Born in Philadelphia and raised in Camden, New Jersey, Nathan obtained his BA from Temple University in 1970. He spent a year in India studying classical languages before returning to Temple for graduate studies in religion. He was a Fulbright dissertation fellow in Sri Lanka and India between 1976 and 1978, and was awarded his PhD in 1979. Subsequently, he served on faculty of many prestigious schools, ultimately landing at the Florida International University, where he was responsible for starting a new department of religious studies. He was also instrumental in starting up Florida International University's program in Jewish studies, in Asian studies, in Jain studies, and in the study of spirituality. But he's best known for his work about Indo-Judaic studies, a subject on which he has written several books. Interestingly, Nathan has also served as an adjunct professor of Hinduism at Hindu University of America, as well as academic dean at the Shivananda Yoga Ashram, Bahamas. Needless to say, Nathan, during his long and distinguished career, has received numerous accolades and awards. His book, Who Are the Jews of India, was a finalist in the 2000 National Jewish Book Award and won the 2004 Vakdevi Saraswati Samman Award from Bharat. He won the President's Award for Achievements and Excellence, as well as Florida International University's Faculty Senate Awards for Research and Services. He was also named Scholar of the Year by the University of South Florida in 1990. Nathan, I don't know how you did all that, but it's impressive, and I'm truly jealous of your resume.
Well, now that I'm retired, I can't imagine how I did it either.
Well, you must have been a busy person, but it's truly an honor to have you with us today. So let's start with something very simple. Why don't we start with your background, your life, particularly your growing up years, and any person or events that influenced your worldview, and particularly how did you get interested in Indic civilization?
Well, that's not a simple question. My mother told me this story. I don't remember it. She said I was 5 years old, and if my mother tells me, I have to believe it, of course. And she said, one time I came down to our Sabbath dinner one Friday evening, and I said, my family, I want to tell you all something. I'm 5. And I said, my very first opportunity, I'm going to India. I have no idea what motivated me or why I said that or what I was thinking. But that's the first inclination. And a very unusual thing, my family had a cabin on a river that we used in the summers. And one of our very near neighbors was a Hindu guy. Born Western, his name was Hugh Campbell, and he was a student of Swami Yukaswarananda at the Ramakrishna Mission in Philadelphia. And I never heard of anything. I never knew anything, but he was a lot of fun. He used to play with us kids and he used to do duck calls with his hands and so on. But then as I got a little older, I remember we'd invite him to our house and want to feed him something, but he was vegetarian, so he didn't eat most of what we served. And all this got me curious. And it was after some years I learned that he was a yogi and an initiate. And he was one of the people that influenced me. Then to top it all off, I came of age during the 1960s, at which time young people such as myself got very interested in Asian culture and especially Asian spirituality. I was an English literature major, but it turned out Temple University had an outstanding department of religion. And I took classes with a Korean Zen monk, with a disciple of Sri Aurobindo, people of that caliber that were not only scholars, but were practitioners. So this approach to religion as an objective, hard-nosed scholar, but as also someone who is an initiate, who follows a tradition, that's what I encountered at Temple University. And then much later, when I was starting a department of religion at Florida International University, I tried to hire people who shared that approach, who were not merely secular scholars. To some extent, I was successful at that, and we developed a good department. But that's sort of my background as to my earliest inklings about India, and one influential person when I was quite young, I mean, single-digit years, and my educational background.
Wonderful, wonderful. And then, of course, you spent time in India, and you studied its various religions, and in fact, you've taught some of its religions, many of its religions. But my question really is about the Jews of India.
Good.
You have written a great deal about that subject and research and written a great deal. And it fascinates me because, we have had almost 2 millennia of being together. And it's been a very small community, as you well know. So I'd like to actually hear from, a Jewish scholar as to what you know about these Jews. And what their experience is and how they felt about living in a Hindu majority society.
This was nothing short of revelatory for me. As you mentioned, my training is in Pali, Sanskrit, the Tibetan, the languages, the textual traditions of South Asia, of India. And I was on a sabbatical in Sri Lanka, doing some work on Buddhist monasticism there. Then after spending some time, I'd finished my work more or less, and it was time to think about going back home. So I said to my wife, I've always heard that in Kochi, in southern India, there's a very old Jewish community there. We're Jewish, so let's go and see. And then we'll travel around India for a few months before we go home. Fine. So it was in 1983, or 1984, we got to Kochi, and we walked over to the synagogue and just started to talk to whomever we saw. And it was a wonderful experience. We felt friendship almost immediately. One thing that I noticed, the Jews of Kochi are very proud Jews and very proud Indians. It was sort of as I am a proud Jew and a proud American. India and America, India more so, have been hospitable and friendly to Jews. So the Jews there love being Indian, love being Jewish. Then the other thing that really got me, as a Jew brought up in America from Eastern European parents, the Holocaust was always so to speak, the elephant in the room. We talked about it some, not too much, but it was always lurking there in our minds in the background. And terribly, sadly, in the past few months, we're seeing why that never seemed too far away, because obviously it wasn't. So people like me, I grew up being very happy to be where we are, but a little suspicious of the world after what had happened to my relatives and to, and so on. What I saw immediately in the Indian Jews was none of that defensiveness, none at all. Being Jewish was a matter of pride to them. And when they meet their friends or meet strangers on the street, that was a matter of pride to everybody. They were welcomed. They were obviously loved and admired. And for me, or someone like me, to imagine what it is like to grow up in a traditional Jewish way, at the same time being respected and welcomed and loved and so forth by everybody else too. We went back to Kochi a little bit later, and we took on the project of learning as much as we could about that community, and in fact did write several books about them. But this was the hook. This is what got me interested. What is a Jew who doesn't have the Holocaust in their personal traumatic history? And that's Indian Jews. And that was the hardest thing for me to understand, because it's instinctual, at least from my experience, to feel a certain way about the outside world. And Indian Jews didn't feel that way and didn't have to feel that way. I remember during the first visit there, we were at the home of the leader of the community. His name was Satu Koder.
Mm-hmm.
And you know the name. And we were just chatting. And he says, the word anti-Semitism does not exist in our Indian dictionary. That is, it was an utter absence. And here are Jews who grew up, they practiced their religion, they were remarkably knowledgeable about their religion. Ours is complicated, as is yours, and they knew Hebrew beautifully. Not too long ago, they spoke a version of Ladino, the sort of the Yiddish of Sephardic Jews. They spoke that, and of course Malayalam, and of course English. So they're starting with 3-4 languages. Then often they worked around India. They'd often pick up Hindi, because that's, as you know, much more practical in India than Malayalam, unless you're in one state. So here are these multilingual people, knowledgeable about Judaism, well integrated in the community. Every evening, Satu's brother, Elias Koder, would have what he called the drinking club. And he would welcome his friends. He had a big table in his house. He was a wealthy man, and he served food and drinks. And you look around the table, there were a few Jews there from the immediate neighborhood, but very nearby was what they called the Parsi Jew, who was a Zoroastrian family, who was sort of the only Zoroastrians, Parsis in that neighborhood. So they were the Parsi Jews. They identified with the community so much. Another person who was always there was the president of the local Jain temple. And he would be there, and often he would bring the snacks for everybody, because we all had our dietary rules. Jews do, Jains do, Hindus do, everybody does. But we know if a Jain could eat it, anybody could eat it. This is because it's the highest standard of, he was there. Of course, some of the Hindu neighbors. And what may be surprising to some people, but not someone who knows Kerala, some of the Muslim neighbors too. One of the mainstays of the community's name was Jacob Cohen. He often read from the Torah scroll. He was very active in the synagogue. And his best friend, and Jacob was an attorney. One of his best friends was a Muslim attorney who he had gone to college with. He went to law school with so many years ago. And so all these people at the table. And the remarkable thing about it is that it's unexceptional. And if I had to often I have many different kinds of guests at my table, and everybody notices it. It's something. It's unusual. Not there. Not with these people. So the ease and very real, meaningful friendships that they had with all of their neighbors. They used to say Carol is God's own country. And of course, we studied a lot of history of that and how it developed that way. But that was still the case in the 1980s when we lived for a year in Kochi.
Yeah, and unfortunately, a lot of them have migrated out of India now, with the formation of Israel. So there's a much smaller contingent now left back in India, but it's so heartening to hear their experiences and how they felt integrated into the society and respected, in the society. So I'm going to come to the multiculturalism and inclusiveness that Indian society, exhibits. But let me take benefit of your knowledge of different religions, of India. You've studied and taught, Jainism, Hinduism, Buddhism, and my goodness, long list, and of course Judaism. So just if you could encapsulate your thoughts on what are the points of similarity of these religions, and where are some significant differences?
Well, I think we tend to view the differences in an exaggerated sense, and we sort of don't recognize very important commonalities. The reason for this is we always talk about the Abrahamic and the Dharmic religions, or Western and Eastern. But that's how we, almost on common sense, as well as from most every book we're going to read about religions, that's how it's divided up. Well, there's Judaism, Christianity, Islam in the Western world, and there's Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism in South Asia, in your part of the world. It's true, that's meaningful. However, I look at it an entirely different way. There are two kinds of religions in the world. We agree. One, I call old religions, and two, I call new religions. Old religions obviously include Hinduism and Judaism. Let's just stick to those two for now. And new religions talk about the religions that grew out of the old religions, the mother religions. So obviously Christianity and then Islam developed out of Jewish traditions, more or less. And similarly, well, I know my Jain friends would not agree. For them, it's even older than Hinduism, but somehow or other, you had the development of Hinduism and forgive me, offshoots, Jainism, Buddhism, and Sikhism. Okay. The old religions have these things in common. They, number one, they have all kinds of concerns about purity. That could have diet, that could have immersions, that could have how husbands and wives should relate to one another, how they should treat each other, and things like that. So we do so many of the same things. You have your tanks at the temples. We have what we call mikvaot, or sort of captured water. And before we do many rituals, we have to go in there and immerse ourselves. So that's typical of these old religions. And if you look at indigenous traditions around the globe that resemble old religions, you'll see the same purity concern. That's one. And purity includes diet, because you have to eat pure food, however that is understood, which in the Western world has made barriers between religions, right? I can't eat food that is not kosher. So that has the effect and the intended effect of limiting my social sphere. India, on the other hand, vegetarianism is pretty much makes the food acceptable to everybody. So we don't have the barriers, though we do have the food concern. Another thing, food purity. One other thing I think is very important is place, where you are. It was traditional in Hinduism that if there's no Hindu temple, you can't live there. Now, of course, you have Hindu temples all over the world, so it's open to you. But there is a sense, and my word, we certainly saw that with the Ram Mandir, Ayodhya and so forth. That place is what's important. And you can't build the Ram Mandir anywhere you feel like it. It's got to be on that spot. And for certain rituals, for certain behaviors, you have to go to Varanasi. That's where you do it. And Varanasi is not substitutable. Kailash is Kailash. You can't say, well, here's another mountain, let's go there. All right. And basically it comes down to Bharat is Bharat. This is where you can be a Hindu until modern times. Well, we had the same idea that we should all live in Israel, and you can't substitute Jerusalem for Washington or any other city, and you certainly can't substitute the Temple Mount, what we call Har Habayit, where the temple used to be. So places are not substitutable. Now, why does that matter? Because neither of us, Hindus or Jews, have had control over our places for much of history. We were kicked out of our land twice, the last time during the 1st century, so it's 22,000 years until we got it back. And many of us returned. Most all the Jews from India did, although it's another story. There are many new Jews sprouting up in India as we speak, but most of the Jews we knew have gone to Israel. So the importance of place. The newer religions don't care about place. You can be a Buddhist anywhere. You don't have to be in Kyoto or Lhasa or Bodh Gaya. It's nice to go. It's a pilgrimage site. But there's no geographic limit to the practice of Buddhism or Islam. It goes all over the world. And in a more, what shall we say, forceful way, seeks converts. Buddhism likes to get people to join them, but they don't push it. Christianity and Islam are the other way. So the newer religions are what we might call universal in the sense that they can be practiced anywhere. Whereas our older religions, yours and mine, are local religions. That is, even if I live in America, Israel is still my reference point, right? And we're all seeing that in contemporary times. So the old religions have some things in common, and the new religions have some things in common with each other. They're all universal or missionizing religions. Judaism and Hinduism, because they're local, that Judaism is absolutely the right religion for Jews, and Hindu is absolutely the right religion for Hindus. And we do admit converts in, depending on our tradition within Judaism or Hinduism. We do allow conversions in, but we don't seek them. So I know that topic in casual conversations in India over the years has come up repeatedly. We like you because you don't try to convert us, I was told. Right? And of course, I think only you and I, our people, can really appreciate how destructive missionized religions can be. It can destroy families and cultures and cause endless heartbreak. So we have that in common. So the newer religions can be practiced anywhere. They're missionizing religions and so forth, whereas the older religions are place-bound. And the right religion for the people born into it.
Thank you. I think that's a very clear exposition of the similarities and perhaps some differences as well. If we could add the dimension of spiritualism, the dimension of being family-centric, and also emphasis on knowledge. I think those are also some very, very important similarities certainly between Hinduism and Judaism.
Yeah, we are both known in America anyway. Jews and Hindus are known for their strong, strong families and commitments to education.
Yeah.
So those are the kind of things we also have in common, of course.
Absolutely. Talking about the subject that we touched upon a little bit earlier, this inclusiveness that you see in Indian society. I mean, this extends beyond beyond Jews, as you know. India has been taking in repressed people from all over the world for a long period of time. Jews are only one of the many. In fact, there's probably one of the oldest Christian church in south of India. And of course, we had the Parsis, the Zoroastrians. They were displaced from modern day Iran in the 8th century, and they found a place, a respectable place, as a matter of fact, in the Indian society. Baha'is came from Persia as well 200 years ago. And as a matter of fact, there was even a contingent of Polish people who came during the Second World War, and they were received very warmly. So here, there is this example after example of people, finding their place in the Indian society. So, knowing what you know about the Indian society and about the, our belief system and how we view the world, can you just tell us a little bit about, just in your own words, about, how these people were received from your perspective? And then,
Of course, we were probably the first of the foreign religions to come to India, maybe. And our story, the Jews, whether they're in Mumbai or Cochin, the two old Jewish communities in India, they all tell a story, as do the Parsis, by the way, of coming by ship and coming to land from the ship and being welcomed by the local kings, maharajas, whatever. Parsis are a small group, as are Jews. And I think part of the reason for the harmonious acculturation in India has to do with small numbers. It also has to do with both the Parsis and the Jews were able to contribute to Indian society in a number of ways, but right now I'll just say in trading and commerce and things like that, which helped for prosperity in India and so forth. So then, not much longer, the Baha'is came, and I know the lovely temples, and I know some Baha'is in India, but I don't know much about them as a community in India. I know something about Parsis or about Jews. And of course, the most recent such group are the Tibetans.
yes,
I know a fair amount about them as well. And they even talk to a Tibetan, they say the same thing the Jews say. These people are so wonderful to us. They just helped us. They put us here. The Tibetans receive subsidies from the government until they get on their own feet. And the Jews, the Parsis, and the Tibetans all probably have a higher standard of living than your average Hindu citizen of India. They were allowed to prosper without jealousy. This is my newest book. I don't know if it shows very well, Jews and India. I have another book earlier called Jews in India.
Yeah, I see it.
Yeah. Mutual influences over 2 millennia. And what this book does is it looks at various methods and aspects of how we know that India influenced Jews. My word, there are tens of thousands of us and hundreds of millions of Indians. So, of course, we were influenced. But surprisingly, perhaps, because of the openness in India, we also influenced India quite a bit. I mentioned in commerce and in connections with the Western world. But in many ways, Jews contributed to Indian society and influenced, in much more modern times, a number of the, what shall I say, important or well-known swamis or Buddhist monks or lamas and nuns. Many were Jews who came to India fleeing the Holocaust, When they got in India, they probably had before they came a spiritual interest, and I met a number of such people who became Hindus or became Buddhists, and had a great deal to do with the development, especially of Buddhism, in the 20th and 21st century. So some of the very big names in the Buddhist world were Jews who came to India fleeing persecution, acculturated to India, and eventually adopted Indian religions. So that's one kind of influence. And what happened was, of course, you can always predict it. The women's movement, which was started in the West before it took on the East, some of the women who were active in promoting women's equality or ordination or education in various religions had an influence on how those religions developed in very, very recent times, especially in terms of women's position and level of knowledge in these traditions. So we get the influences a lot of ways.
Yeah, very interesting, Nathan. And I don't want to engage in virtue signaling, but then you have the European experience, where, of course, Jews have been kicked around for pretty much everywhere for a long period of time, and then the Roma people. It just makes for a very strong contrast.
I tell you, I have not spent much time in Europe by choice. When I was little, I wanted to go to India. I wanted to go to Africa, maybe. But Europe was never on my agenda. Now, I was invited to speak. I did a few times. And certainly, Europe is gorgeous. The buildings and the food and, and the arts, it's sublime and glorious. But there is, I can't help it. I can't get over it. And maybe I shouldn't. There is this undertone of the kind of things you're describing. I don't want to say too much, but a horrible hatred of the other. And that, look, my parents fled Europe long before the Holocaust. My father fled Ukraine during the Russian Revolution. It's a long time ago, because Jews were treated lousy there. They were killed. It wasn't just the Nazis. So Jews wanted to get out of Europe. And I'm sure that had a lot to do, my parents being refugees, to my disdain and avoidance of Europe to the extent possible. That being said, 1 year ago, my wife and I went for a little vacation in Italy, in Tuscany. And it's as beautiful a place as I've ever seen in my life, except I didn't like it. They're great food, great art, great buildings, magnificent, but I couldn't get rid of that feeling. I remember we were visiting the synagogue in Florence. It's one of the great synagogues, and we're there for a Sabbath. And they start to tell us about the history of the synagogue, and it's famous in Italy, but the Italians and the Germans were allies during World War II. The Italians were not such bigots, but as the Germans, but they were not our friends either. So as the American forces were coming up Italy to the north, they're coming near Florence, and the fascists in Italy set fire to the synagogue. That they hated even our building, let alone hating us. And the building, it's a magnificent credit to Italy. So they're setting fire to it. In the meantime, some Italian partisans, the anti-fascists, came and they put out the fire and saved the building. Maybe not because they love Jews, but because they love beautiful artistic buildings. But just I don't understand it. How can you want to, just out of spite, want to destroy beauty? I don't get it, let alone destroy people. India, of course, is the opposite. Jews were treated like younger brothers and sisters. They were coddled. We were treated too well. We got extra benefits just because it's India. So I spent years and years in India and a few months in Europe. And that's my story.
Yeah, thank you for making those observations, Nathan. Let's return to the similarities and differences between different religions and faiths, particularly one aspect of Hindu Dharma, and that is the Western view of Hindus as being polytheistic. It's widely promulgated that Hindus worship murtis and many gods and so on and so forth. Now, Hindus themselves really don't care for that conversation. For them, they see divinity in everything, including inanimate objects. And that, in fact, is one of the basic reasons of this inclusiveness that you described. But my question is this: why should anyone care how I, as a Hindu or some other faith, relate to the divine? That's really fundamental question. And then the attendant question is this business of seeing us as polytheistic. Do you think that is the reason why we have rampant missionary machinery?
I think so. And I think I can see the seeds of change. In the year 2007, the Hindu Dharma Acharya Sabha,
Yes.
you know about it, invited the chief rabbinate of Israel to send a delegation to New Delhi to meet for dialogue. And in 2008, the chief rabbinate invited the Hindu Dharma Acharya Sabha to come to Jerusalem. And I remember one of the Israeli, and only Israelis went on the dialogue. It was Israel, India, Jews, Hindus. And one of the rabbis who he's former chief rabbi of Ireland, which means he didn't have much of a following because there are not many of us there. But David Rosen, very well known, very fine gentleman, he came to America to my house and wanted to talk to me about Hinduism so they could be a little bit prepared to talk to the Swamis. They know that I'm observant Jewish, I know something, and I know I'm a scholar of Indian religion. So I talked to them. They went there, and I wanted this whole polytheism business. After the meetings, they had several days of intensive meetings, discussions. They came out, the rabbis and the swamis, both in New Delhi and in Jerusalem. They issued a statement, points of agreement. And this is, let me use an old phrase, this is mind-boggling. It is recognized now, the chief rabbis of Israel and the Hindu Dharma Acharya Sabha, the teachers, signed on their names. It is recognized that the one supreme being, both in formless and manifest aspects, have been worshipped by Hindus over the millennia. This does not mean that Hindus worship gods and idols. The Hindu relates only to one supreme being when he or she prays to a particular manifestation, the murti or the vigraha. And it goes on. As the two oldest religious traditions in the world, we want the world to recognize that all religions are sacred and valid for their respective peoples. We believe that there is no inherent right embedded in any religion to denigrate or interfere with any other religion or its practitioners. Acceptance of this proposition will reduce interreligious violence, increase harmony among different peoples. Indeed. But what's shocking here is something I've known for years, but most Jews haven't looked into it, is the statement by the rabbis that we worship the same one God, and that all the murtis and names and all these things are just attributes. And we looked into our own sources and found over the centuries rabbis who supported this view, and one who said, yes, we Jews cannot worship murtis or vigrahas or whatever you call them, because we saw God directly at Mount Sinai. So we don't need idols. We have his word. But for other people, the use of the murti is in Hebrew an eight or an edut, a symbol that leads them to the one God. And for them, that's perfect. It leads to the same place. Of course, we know the famous adages from Hinduism, all the rivers flow into one ocean, so all diversity merges into unity. Beautiful thought. And we teach that it doesn't matter what religion. We say the righteous of all nations, and the word nation could just as well mean religion. The righteous of all religions has a share in the world to come, and that's our phrase, share of the world to come, to speak of heaven or moksha or whatever the highest thing is. So we think if you follow your religion, you'll get to the same place I get to if I follow my religion. And you say just the same thing. So, and somehow, so I remember I spoke to that same rabbi after the meetings. I was in Israel. I went to see him. And I said, what changed your mind? What made you think that India is, in essence, monotheistic? He looked at me and says, we read their books with their swamis, and their swamis told us what these words mean. We didn't try to tell them. So if you learn to listen, that's what Dalai Lama always says, that if I say what I know, I'm just talking. But if I listen, then I may learn something new. Well, the rabbis learned something new from the swamis. And this is, I graduate school and here and there in Benares, I studied and learned sacred texts of India. And that was so obvious to me. It was this oneness, that's what we're talking about. It was never even challengeable to me because I learned from Indians. I didn't learn from these Western scholars who have their baggage with them. Even though I studied in American universities, I had Indian professors. So that's it. We worship the same God. And that's what I'm saying. The old religions can see the connections better than new religions are too caught up in the doctrines, the isms, as you once mentioned.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas we're more concerned about what you do and how you live, as are you. Yes, we study, we learn philosophy, we learn the doctrines and all that intensely. And I love the way I was taught about by my professor, how you, in a very traditional setting, okay, the topic is causality. You discuss from a Sankhya perspective, and you take it from a Nyaya perspective and talk about this topic. Okay, now switch positions. You get smart when you do that. You get very smart. And when we study the text, we do it the same way. There's one-on-one, and we argue about what the text means, which is just what Hindu teachers and their students do, and what I'm familiar with the system in Tibet, where it's all back and forth, one-on-one. Say, answer this question, to sharpen the mind so that we can see more. So another similarity is our method of mental training. I'm not speaking meditation mental training. I'm talking about intellect mental training. And if you want to talk about meditation, of course, we can, but we have them too. We have meditation too.
Lovely. Thanks for reminding me about that that meeting of the minds, if you like, with Jewish scholars and Hindu scholars. In fact, I have a copy of that declaration. It's a beautiful declaration. I keep it handy because it's so enlightening, actually, on so many levels.
And in fact, one of my students wrote a master's thesis about those meetings. And who supported and what were the controversies? Because, there's going to be some objectors, and, he talked about NGOs, different kind of religious and other organizations that can affect foreign policies of countries. That was his thesis. And his example were these discussions between the Hindus and the Jews, which came at the same time of the great warming, long overdue warming of loving friendship between India and Israel. Just I don't want to forget to say it. A recent survey in India, excuse me, a recent survey in Israel. The question is, what is your favorite country? 82% of Israelis said India.
Wow.
Yeah, wow.
That's quite an eye-opening.
Really, really, and it's got to do with these thousands of years together. I mean, we don't know in detail, but Jews know. Oh yeah, India was good to us. They may know a little more than that, and I don't know what average Hindu in the street knows, but I wear these things, and I can't tell you how many times I'm walking here or there, whatever I'm doing. Somebody comes up to me, "Oh, sir, are you from Israel?" I'm Jewish, but please, will you take some tea? I've never spoken with you. I just want to ask you some questions. So I'd love to. Of course, the first question is, how does 0.002% of the population have 20% of the Nobel Prizes? But I can't help with that problem.
That's
But
the emphasis.
we train our minds.
Yeah.
And for us, every Jewish male anyway, now I hope it's everybody, needs to study, needs to learn how to think and study in this way.
Yeah.
For everybody.
Yeah, you mentioned ism, so let me just quickly ask that question, because it's actually a sticking point in my mind. When I look at, of course, we like to call ourselves Sanatan Dharma or Hindu Dharma and so on and so forth, but we are known as Hinduism.
Yeah.
But there are many other isms. The Jainism, the Sikhism, Buddhism, Shintoism, and all that. But Judaism, of course, but then it's not Christianism, it's Christianity. It's not Muhammadism, it's Islam. I'm just wondering if there is a subliminal message being passed on here. And I looked up in the dictionary, ism. This is what it says. An oppressive and especially discriminatory attitude or belief.
Wow.
And I said, wow, exactly. Wow, that is the message that is being passed on at a subliminal level.
I know that when you call something Hinduism, people think there's some very strong things that all Hindus X, Y, or Z. Right? Hinduism means what are the beliefs of Hinduism? What are the ism? Judaism, same. But of course, scholars nowadays don't do that. They talk about Judaisms. They make it plural at least, or Hinduisms. That there are many, many different forms and expressions, and it attacks that not monotheism. This rock, this heavy thing that is one thing that is a religion. And really, there are many, many streams within religions, and they interact with each other. So one thing that constantly amazes me, because when I'm studying Jews in India, I have to know something about how people in the ancient world moved about and what they knew about each other. And I found in Jewish texts from the first century, not only Hinduism discussed, but in great admiration. First century.
Interesting.
Amazing. And it's the kind of thing that's in the text, but nobody looks at it. But because of my interest, that caught my mind, and that I've tried to let people understand that Jews have thought well of Hindus for literally 2,000 years. And Jews and Hindus have had, and Indians have had commercial exchanges for at least that long, probably longer. But it's not that we just learned about Hinduism last year. Now, what's said about it, sometimes the earliest writings are extraordinarily positive. It goes up and down throughout the history, but some of my colleagues have been trying to study Jewish attitudes towards Hinduism through time, and mostly it's very positive. Though there was this bugaboo about polytheism versus monotheism that I think is a Christian issue that infiltrated Jewish thinking as well. But the earliest, it doesn't think that way at all.
Interesting. let's talk about a not so good subject, and that is the phenomenon of anti-Semitism and Hinduphobia. In fact, I like to call it Hindudvesha for
I do.
reasons I'm sure you can understand. Um, and of course, we are. I mean, you've carried the blood libel for 2,000 years now, and now we're being, of course, painted with the exact same brush: oppressive, destructive, genocidal. My goodness, I can't think of enough adjectives to describe it. Just like your perspective, this is a very corrosive phenomenon, and it's been around for a long time. But in modern times, it's become, you know, the pitch and the volume is increasing. So just your perspective on the whole phenomenon and how we can come together to address it.
Well, we need each other so much right now,
Yeah.
Hindus and Jews. You know that we are under attack like I have never seen in my lifetime. Uh, and we so need a friend, government, that is respected and strong. And India is the obvious one. I appreciate the personal and the religious respect, affection, and so forth. I would like to see more. And I love how Modi and Bibi are friends and all that's wonderful. But I'd like to see that more consistently in policy in the UN and places like that. But we know you are our friends. Israelis love you so much. One thing absolutely astounds me about this anti-Semitism and Hindudvesha is how similar they are. I hadn't seen the anti-Hindu writing and caricatures people draw, but my word, the Hindus even look like Jews in those caricatures. The long nose and the avarice and all this garbage. It's like they took the old German anti-Semitic writing and just changed the name Jew and Hindu. I have no doubt that a lot of it is rooted in jealousy. Given the chance, both of us perform in any society at the highest levels. And because we don't mind working for it, that's why. And people who sort of feel they have it coming to them don't put in the effort and therefore despise us, hate us, because they can't imagine what it is to work real hard and they assume we're getting it through devious means. But right now, I tell you, it's the worst I've seen in this world, and I'm not young. I wish I knew how to get rid of them. These kind of hatreds, I don't.
And Nathan, I think you correctly pointed out that the two phenomenon, they seem to be coming from the same playbook.
Yes, very important.
Yeah, and I think it is high time that the two communities actually realize it in a meaningful way to come together and fight it together as one phenomenon, as opposed to kind of fighting our own individual battles. So, I would definitely look to scholars like you to help us think through that and promote that common thinking and common ways to approach it.
Just on a non-intellectual level, but sometimes something bad happens in Israel, so the Jews here get together and have some kind of demonstration. And it started maybe 20 years ago here. I know there's more and more people I know, Hindu people, coming to those demonstrations. And that was beautiful. If we're the only ones speaking up for ourselves, we might as well be silent. And you too. But it's only when, think about Dr. Martin Luther King and his great march in Birmingham. you see him marching, but one side is Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, and there's some Christian leaders with the collars. And it's that united front that can make people back off. If it's only Black people speaking out about rights for Blacks, they're in a corner. They right. But if they can see the alliances that we can make, and how can these different people get along with each other, that makes people think more than anything. So yeah, and sign the petitions and go to the marches and be visible. That's important.
Yeah, and I think you've been fighting this battle for a long time, and we can learn, a thing or two from the Jewish community as to how to come together and how to fight these battles. And I think that's a dialogue that has to take place.
But right now, we're not doing so well, my friends.
Yeah, I know. It's but I think the point is that we need to fight this battle as one, as opposed to individual battles, because they're coming from the same place. And that's the sad part. Let's explore a little bit about the world in conflict. The world is in conflict. The conflict is increasing in volume as well as in severity, as with time. And I often wonder, a religion is typically portrayed as a solution to, conflict. But, I wonder if it truly is. And then I wonder if actually religion is at the root cause of many of these conflicts.
It's both. I mean, yeah, it can help to solve things. It's also maybe even more obviously true that it causes things. I don't know if the root is religious disagreement, because so what? But those get used for political purposes. They're not inherently political. I'll tell you one. It's so depressing. Quite a while ago, I was in a film on Muslim-Jewish dialogue, and one of the Muslims was, both are friends. One is no longer, one is alive and fine. And we could talk about all these things in common, and here's what could be done in the Middle East, if only, and so on. Then in the past few months, that same person who I felt like we were on the same side is on the opposite side from me now. And we can't be friends anymore, I feel. This crap goes deep. And it goes deeper than our rational minds often, these passions. And I know I can't be friends with someone who's criticizing Israel excessively, especially now. I cannot maintain a relationship because of the crisis we're in. So I have a significant number fewer friends now than I did. And of course, I'm just sad. And I don't want to end this talk on sadness. So what else do you do?
Don't end on sadness, obviously. I think there's a lot to learn from religion, from faith. It gives solace, to people. But I do want to dig a little bit into it, and forgive me for asking this question. The religion is a source of many of these conflicts, as you pointed out, even at the social level, it turns out. But how much of that, and look, your faith is a monotheistic faith, but I wonder sometimes how much of it is due to the mono part of it, because my way is, it's my way or highway, that basically is fundamentally, leads to
all I can say is the Muslims and Christians got it wrong when they learned from us. I mean, yeah, of course, it's very important for us, one God. But if the Swamis of the Hindu Dharma Charya Sab are correct, you do too. And the more and more, as I retired and getting older and, all this stuff, I'm doing much more and more learning about Kabbalah and Hasidism and meditation techniques from my tradition. I could, in my memoir, I could never have gotten to whatever level I am now in Jewish practice had I not spent years in Hindu and Buddhist practice. There's a little story from a great rabbi who said, if I sell coal, I have a bag of coal, and somebody else sells diamonds, and I look at the diamonds, I'm only interested in coal because that's where I make my money. That's my business. I don't care. But if I sell sapphires and I see somebody with diamonds, I can appreciate them, their beauty and value and so on. So it goes for religions. What shall I say? If I don't have it, the inner dimension of the religion, I won't recognize it in another religion. But if I do, then I easily see it elsewhere. And that, of course, that's the way that religion could solve a lot of problems, but it takes much more work and much more time than people can put into it to get to that kind of place where you can get to the heart of your religion and therefore be open to the heart of other religions. And that's, of course, the realm of spirituality and so forth. That's not an easy way.
Yeah. I think what you're pointing out is when you are looking at faith as a way to approach spirituality, then that takes you to a different dimension versus if you're looking at faith as a political domination tool.
Right, for sure.
That takes you to a completely different place. Yeah, and I think that is a beautiful, exposition of the differences, different approaches one can have to religion. Thank you for that.
In India, it felt to me like the more I was Jewish, the more Hindus respected me.
Quite. It's all about spirituality.
Religion is good, or spirituality is good in India, and it should be everywhere. And if that's manifesting, then you don't have a problem with people. They'll respond to it.
Quite right. So, let me just one more question, Nathan. And, when I'm in the presence of a Jewish scholar like yourself, I can't let go of this question. And that is about the place of swastika in Hindu Dharma, as you know. And how it's been conflated with the Nazi symbol and so on and so forth, and gives us a lot of heartache, even in modern times, as you well know. And it's just like, I know the declaration from that joint meeting actually addressed that. But I just like you to kind of talk about it in your own words, how you would talk to your Jewish friends about, the place of swastika in Hindu Dharma and why it's not same thing as the hated Nazi symbol.
Yeah, well, just for words, I would call it a Nazi cross. I would make sure what I'm talking about. In my office in school, I had a banner I got at some temple. There's a Jai Mataji with the swastikas on both sides. I had it prominent in my office. And my students, they come to see the professor. They look at that. What's that? So I put a swastika prominently in my office, just, of course, to get the students to ask a question. What's that doing there, sir? And then I can explain that how this was the same symbol, and it was Native American religions. It's common in many, I tell them about the swastika and how it is, in its proper context, a beautiful, profound thing. We know what happens. For whatever reasons, it's a long discussion. Hitler took that kind of symbol and did what he did with it and defiled it. and defiled it so thoroughly that's extraordinarily difficult for someone from my part of the world to come to see it in any other way. Difficult, but necessary, of course. Actually, get very simple. They look different. If you look at the swastika and you look at the Hakenkreuz, the German thing, they don't really look that much alike. And if you just, here's this, here's that, if you just use visuals, maybe that's effective. But The Cunning of History, one of my professors wrote a book by that name, that whatever, some things happen in history that has certain intents, but plays out differently. And the swastika's the cunning of history. Here's this beautiful, holy, spiritual symbol that somehow, through historical process, becomes, in Europe, the primary symbol of hatred. Now, I used to think of the cross in almost the same way. I don't now. I've come to open my heart much more to Christianity, for friends, for other people, of course. But there was a time when the cross itself, to me, felt like what the swastika feels to other people. And you just have to somehow, if you want to get over it, talk to people. I mean, I asked the rabbis, what made you decide you're not idolaters? Oh, we talk to them, we listen to them. And often that's what it takes. We have to have a lot of conversations.
Yeah, I think it's up to, of course, scholars like yourself and, of course, people like us who are talking on public platforms to educate our respective people. And, in fact, I'm looking to organize some, joint events, joint celebrations where we will talk about a lot of these things and hopefully have some fun as well in the process. But the idea is to sort of, remove this veil of strangeness between our two people and talk about things that unite us as opposed to things that, keep us apart.
Most people in America don't know any Indians.
Yeah.
If they do, it's so different when you can actually be friends with people and then people talk honestly and it goes to the heart and things change. It's like that dialogue session between the rabbis and the swamis. A good heart and honest talking and intimacy, really, it's a slow process that way, but that can do it.
Absolutely. And your point about Hindus kind of keeping to themselves or Indians keeping to kind of themselves for up to this point is well taken. We've been here only for about 50 plus years, as you well know. And our first priority was to have a good financial foundation for our society, for our families, and raise the next generation. Now that we feel relatively secure in our adopted land, I think we're coming out and talking about these issues more openly, and hopefully that dialogue will continue and be well received in the society. Well, Nathan, I really like to thank you for the wonderful hour we spent together, and I really appreciate all the wonderful things you said about the Jewish experience in India, and of course, about my own faith and how you view it from a scholarly perspective. And this is a conversation, that I think I think our two communities need to have on an ongoing basis. And I once again thank you from the bottom of my heart for being so generous with your time.
Pleasure to see you, my friend. Thank you for the opportunity. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Likewise. Thank you so much, and look forward to future conversations of this kind.
You bet.
Shalom. Namaste.